and the poor living in abysmal conditions. And in the midst of all of this, the American people want Congress, want their elected officials to address corporate greed, to address income and wealth inequality, and end a tax system in which some of the wealthiest people in this country in a given year do not pay a nickel.
Democratic lawmakers are finally making huge progress on the fourth stimulus package, and it has been decided that billions of dollars in unused relief money will be going towards new stimulus checks for certain Americans. If you want to receive this fourth stimulus check, then be sure to continue watching this video because you definitely don't want to miss out on this. The Pennsylvania legislature has until June 30th to pass a new budget approaches. Pass a new budget, support for some spending of the state's billions of dollars in remaining stimulus money, and surplus tax revenue is gaining bipartisan action. Discussions are preliminary, and top budget negotiators want to reach a deal as soon as possible, but lawmakers, lobbyists, and top staff pointed to a small number of partisan proposals that have been put forward. On issues from the environment to child care, there could be building blocks for a spending plan. The House Appropriations Committee Chair told reporters this week that we move forward trying to identify areas of agreement first, and then we'll identify areas of disagreement and try to work through those. Each year, Pennsylvania's governor and legislature must agree on how to route tens of billions of dollars to education, economic development, and human services. These are decisions that affect every person in Pennsylvania. But the state's financial picture has changed in recent years, with the state's coffers getting $8 billion boost from stimulus money in 2021. In response, Wolf and his legislative allies called on the legislature to spend some of that windfall on higher education, paid family leave, and school repairs, among many other priorities. Early this year, Wolf released a budget proposal that would appropriate billions of dollars more to education and infrastructure. Republicans countered that additional spending would actually fiscally be responsible. But everybody, Pennsylvania still has about $2 billion in remaining stimulus money, and at least $5 billion in surplus tax revenue. To address the soaring cost of living and inflation, Governor Wolf is pushing the legislature to approve using American Rescue Plan money to give people $2,000 stimulus checks. They would go to every household earning less than $80,000, which is the majority of people in Pennsylvania. Other issues are getting Republican attention, everybody, like more state funding for childcare and pre-K, nursing home, and housing. Progressive lawmakers have been building bipartisan support for a broad housing plan, Whole Homes Repair Fund, which would actually use stimulus money to provide grants to homeowners and landlords alike to make renovations big and small. After 2 years and 6 relief bills into the crisis, the U.S. has spent the majority of its available stimulus relief funding, but billions of dollars across a handful of categories have not gone out the door. Beginning under the former president and continuing now with President Biden, Congress has approved some $4.5 trillion in total aid spending. According to Treasury Department data, federal agencies have formally committed to using about $4 trillion in that, and have made about $3.5 trillion in actual payments to date. Budget experts say that it can often take time for the total pot of funds to make its way to the American people. That's because government agencies such as the SBA and Department of Labor go through a process of legally committing to a portion of allotted funding, which is known as obligating. Then they start to actually spend it. The $500 billion or so in available relief resources have not been obligated and may not end up being spent by agencies. What are your thoughts on this, everybody? Is President Biden going to do something about this and help out the American people with stimulus checks this year? Or will President Biden hold back the stimulus? Tell me what you think on this.
Mr. Dodaro, I'm going to start with a round of questions, and then it looks like the next person up will be Senator Johnson. Mr. Dodaro, to date, GAO has made 121 recommendations on actions that Congress could take to address the wasteful spending and inefficient operations listed in the annual duplication report. There are currently 59 open recommendations. How should Congress prioritize which recommendations to address? Are there particular recommendations that you think we should focus on first?
I absolutely think those recommendations that have significant dollar savings potential ought to be among the top priorities.
Right.
You know, I issued a report last month that I've repeatedly warned Congress that the federal government's on an unsustainable long-term fiscal path. The more actions Congress could take to reduce federal spending, the more that situation will help.
And with inflation on the rise since last fall, Americans have been significantly affected by the rising cost of goods and services, and more than 8 in 10 Americans now say the economy is either an extremely or very important issue in determining how they will vote. Folks, there's a ton of news about the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits that I want you to know, so be sure to continue watching this video because you definitely don't want to miss out on this. We have a ton of good news to come. Biden and his administration unveiled a brand new plan for how they would take action to help the American people financially. Eligible Americans may be able to claim up to $500 in extra stimulus cash. So President Biden spoke to a crowd of union supporters this week, hoping to put a positive spin on his economic record and made inflation not seen in decades. And Biden sought to reassure the people that tackling the worst inflation in the nation has seen in decades is a top priority for him and the administration. The speech came a day before the Federal Reserve could raise interest rates as much as 3/4 of a percentage point, as it attempts to get inflation under control. The president acknowledged that inflation is sapping the strength of a lot of families as the price of gas and food skyrockets. But even as he sought to emphasize administration, it's fully focused on the problem. The president conceded he is left without many options to fight the price hikes. The president acknowledged inflation is sapping the strength of a lot of families as the price of gas and food skyrockets. But even as he sought to emphasize his administration is fully focused on this, the president conceded he is left without many options to fight the price hikes, particularly in a narrowly divided Senate. Folks, I do want to see President Biden do something for the American people, and I hope he can step up to the plate and give out stimulus checks before it's too late. Biden stated the problem is Republicans in Congress are doing everything they can to stop the plans to bring down costs on ordinary families, and that's why the results are not finished either. And Biden on Tuesday touted his administration's efforts to the nation's recovery from the crisis. He also mentioned some actions are taken, and others he's considering, to fight inflation, but Biden has previously said there is not much more he's able to do that will have a noticeable effect. He's also mentioned some actions taken right now, and others he's considering, to fight inflation, but Biden has previously said that there is not much more he's able to do that will have a noticeable effect. The White House has been trying for months to demonstrate its commitment to dampening inflation and bringing down soaring prices that are placing stress on American families. So combined with a dropping stock market and intense warnings from high-powered CEOs, the economy has become the White House's top political problem and priority. But the president's spokesperson argues that Americans will be able to weather the economic storm thanks to the actions that Biden took in office. And now the Minnesota's frontline workers are able to pay and apply for their share of $500 million in hero pay. Employees, however, must take certain steps to comply with notification requirements. The Minnesota governor signed the Frontline Worker Pay Law, authorizing state-funded bonus and payments to various frontline workers, including assisted living employees. Employers must post a notice about the program at each work site and provide papers on how to get it, and provide papers on how to receive the check.
Do that job better to make sure the Western drought does not significantly get worse, but we can improve.
First, thank you to this committee for the investment of $8.3 billion. For just investment in storage, it's roughly equivalent in the last 18 months of this administration that the previous administration invested. So we invested $461 million in storage alone. So resources are always of assistance.